Welcome. So this is the next in our series of lectures that go along with the course Science and Cooking from Haute Cuisine to Soft Matter Science. And today we're very privileged to have some wonderful chocolatiers. And before we get to them, as always, we have the boring stuff, which is a little bit of science, a little bit of what we're teaching in the class, something maybe a little bit of science having to do with what we will hear. So this week in class, we're going to discuss elasticity. It has to do with how things feel to your mouth. That's determined by the elasticity. And that's very important in chocolate. There's some beautiful examples here, which I will describe briefly. But also in chocolate, there are some other things that are very important, and I want to describe that as well. Let me start, though, by acknowledging, as we always do, our sponsors, the people who sponsor this public lecture series and help with the course. Whole Foods provides all the laboratory supplies, which is food, of course. Jose Andres and his Think Food groups have been wonderful sponsors, and Alicia Foundation has been an intellectual contributor to the class from the very beginning. Zertoli is helping to pay for some of the chefs coming from Barcelona, and this week we have Taza Chocolate, Specialty Foods Boston, Oya Restaurant, who have also contributed. So we're very grateful to our sponsors. And today, when I shut up, you'll hear from two wonderful chocolatiers, Enrique Rovira and Ingrid Faré, and I apologize if I don't get the pronunciations quite right. Just by way of preparing you, next week we're going to discuss thickeners, and we have, again, a group of chefs from restaurants near Barcelona coming to tell us about them, and so I encourage you to come as well. So today I want to tell you, remind you a bit of things that we've talked for those of you who've attended some of the other lectures, and tell you something that's actually quite important for chocolate. So most materials have different phases. For example, the common material, or material of which we are very familiar with, is water, which has three phases: solid, liquid, and gas. And we can draw a phase transition, a point at which the material changes from solid to liquid. That's the melting temperature. There's a well-defined temperature at which it undergoes a phase transition. This is something as a function of temperature that virtually all materials exhibit, and that turns out to be very, very important in understanding what you do with chocolate. In addition, when you have something, for example, as you cool something down, remember what happens is that the molecules, if you think of it from a molecular perspective, the molecules go from their very disordered state, which they're all wiggling and moving around and moving over and around each other continually, to a state where they're locked in place in some crystalline solid and some crystalline structure if it turns out to be a solid. And I'm going to show you an example. Again, these animations are courtesy of Naveen Sinha. Let me see if I can play this one. See, that's liquid, and it's moving around, and then it starts to solidify. Now, the process of solidification, you saw here this initial solidification, that can take quite some time. That can take quite a bit of time, and if any of you were here in the earlier lectures, we saw an example by Joan Roca, who used this to supercool water so it remains liquid below the freezing temperature, and then he poured it and it immediately turned into a solid. And the reason you can do that is you can prevent the crystallization by preventing this nucleation. So this is a very slow process, and controlling nucleation turns out to be one of the most important things and something that you want to do very precisely with chocolate. There is a different way that you can get crystallization, and that is if you have some ordered structure already here. This, you don't have an ordered structure. This is called homogeneous nucleation because the nucleation occurs randomly throughout all of space. Heterogeneous nucleation occurs when you have some ordered structure, and because the structure is already ordered, these molecules can find their right locations very, very rapidly and can crystallize much more readily. In fact, that's what happens with normal ice formation. It doesn't happen with homogeneous random nucleation of nuclei of ice, but rather by heterogeneous nucleation. Some places, some disordered places, dust or whatever, that leads to the nucleation of ice. Now, the same thing is very important in chocolate. Now, chocolate, the most important component of chocolate is this cocoa butter, and like all fats or oils that has a different range of melting temperature. In particular, cocoa butter has a variety of different melting temperatures. The reason for that is that there are different possible phases. There are different molecules that can arrange themselves in different crystalline structures. So ice has a relatively simple structure. In fact, ice has a very complicated structure. But here, for cocoa butter, there are a variety of different crystalline structures, each of which has its own melting temperature. And so each of these can arrange themselves into different types of structure. And it's certain structures that give, certain structures of crystals that give chocolate its particular character. And so what we might learn, I'm not sure, I haven't heard what Enrique will tell us about tempering chocolate, but that's one of the most important things that you do to make chocolate have the right appearance, the right mouthfeel, and the right characteristics. What you want to do is get a certain crystalline structure. And what happens, the way you do tempering chocolate is shown schematically by this cartoon. What you do is you lower the temperature of chocolate to a state where there are lots of crystals of different structures that form. You don't want all of them, so then you raise the temperature, and the crystal structures of the crystals of the structure that you don't want begin to melt. Then you can you're only left with the structure that you want. You can lower the temperature, and those then serve as heterogeneous nuclei. Those serve as nucleation points for the crystals to grow. So this way, you can force the chocolate to grow in the crystal structure that you want. It all has to do with taking advantage of the different temperatures of the melting points of the different structures, and taking advantage that if you lower the temperature, you get lots of nuclei of different types. Raise it up, you can get rid of the ones you don't want, and you're left with ones that you want, and everything will nucleate then around that, and the other type of crystals won't grow. So this is how one goes about tempering chocolate. And of course, one of the reasons you do that is that you get different textures. You get different behaviors, but the texture is in particular important, and the texture in part is what might be called, what you might sense by your, this is the right slide, sorry. I was using a different slide from before, but this is, I did some Google research to find different types of textures that I wanted to show. You might imagine something like a chocolate mousse. It's very light, it's very soft in texture. This somewhat airy chocolate bar is somewhat harder, but still somewhat soft in texture. And this chunk chocolate is even harder. So the difference in this is how you bite it, how it feels in your mouth. In actual fact, the mouthfeel, the science behind the mouthfeel is still a subject of great debate, of great research. If one could actually really quantify that, you would become very valuable, your research would become very valuable to the food companies. But we do know that, in fact, what determines this is the elasticity. So let's look for a few minutes at elasticity. So for this, unfortunately, I have to go back and remind you of some old types of science. Those of you who are laughing know what Hooke's law is. I want to remind you of a spring. So think of a spring, and if I take a spring and I put a weight on it, what happens? It goes down, right? So there's a force, because the weight of the weight of that weight that I'm putting on it pulls the spring down. It gets longer. It gets longer by a certain extra length, delta L, and the degree to which it gets longer for the amount of force that you put on is determined by the spring, the Hooke's law, and this gives you the spring constant. And whenever you see equation, so this tells me that the spring constant, that's the constant, that's what characterizes how stiff the spring is. The spring constant depends on the force and on the extension. If the force gets larger for a given extension, then the spring constant is stiffer. It's a stiffer spring. So if I want to stretch a stiff spring this much, I need a larger force. And it's just this simple linear relationship. Well, if you want to apply the same thing, gives you the elasticity of the spring. If you want to apply the same thing to a piece of food, you don't usually use a spring, but you can think of the same sort of thing. So you can think of some object, some piece of food, for example, and you can measure what's called a force displacement curve. The same thing. How much I stretch it, what the force is, how much longer it gets. But because it's a block of food, then you don't really want to worry that it's wider or narrower. It doesn't matter, but the force will be different. So what you do is you don't consider the force, but rather you consider what's called the stress. That is, you take the force and you normalize it, you divide by the area. And similarly, when you displace something, you don't want to worry whether it's large or small. You want to have it uniform depending on whatever size food that you're looking at. So you don't worry about the actual displacement, but rather the relative displacement, how much it's displaced compared to its initial length. And that's called the strain. And so now you can do the same thing and calculate the elastic constant the same way as we calculate the elastic constant for a spring. But now we replace the force by stress, the displacement by a strain, and we just take the ratio of the stress over the strain, and we put the same numbers in, and we get this equation. And you're supposed to clap. You're very lucky tonight because we have lots of equations. So this is the same way of measuring the elasticity for a food, and something that's a larger elasticity takes a larger force. This is a stiffer food. It feels more solid to your mouth. So the mousse takes a very small force. You just take a little bit of force and it squeezes down, it changes its shape, whereas the chunk chocolate, you have to bite down hard. Okay, that's a high elastic constant. And what determines this is, it turns out, the most important thing is you can think of the material as being made up of a bunch of, for example, a bunch of molecules, and there's some interaction between them. So I can draw it schematically as each of these nodes being a molecule, and they're connected by springs. And then you can see that what happens when I want to pull it, it depends both on the spring constant, just the same way as I calculated the spring constant of the before, depends on the spring constant, but it also depends on the density, the number of springs. And so rather than worrying about a spring constant, to think of it in a more fundamental term, I think of some bond and some energy, and then I can write the elastic constant as the energy of the bond divided by the density, the number per unit volume, and that is another equation of the week. And this tells me a great deal, because now I can understand why it is that you don't mind biting into some chocolate mousse, but you do mind, for example, biting into the spoon. You won't deform the spoon, but you will deform the chocolate mousse. I can do a simple calculation. It's a metal, it's a chocolate. The real reason is not so much that the bonds are different, because they are somewhat different. They may be different by a factor of 10, the energy of the bonds, but what's really important is the density of the bonds. A metal has got molecules or atoms that are very, very close to each other. The distance between the atoms is very short, so the density is very large, and so the number per unit volume gets very, very large, and that leads to a very large elastic constant, whereas something like chocolate has bigger molecules. They're big fat molecules. They have a much weaker interaction, but that's not so important. The real thing is that they're much larger in size. They're larger in size, the density goes down, and therefore the elastic constant goes down. So it's really this comparison that leads to the difference, and that's why you can bite into chocolate and not into the spoon. And so with that, let me now turn it over to somebody who can really tell you about chocolate and introduce Enrique and Ingrid.
Haces tú, voy para allá. Tracy, necesitamos 2 hojas en blanco de papel.
Bona tarda a tothom.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, això sí. Bueno, soc Enric Rovira, soc xocolater.
My name is Enric Rovira, and I'm a chocolatier.
I junt... Això funciona? Aquí, ara sí. Music?
Well, here we are.
Molt bé. El primer que... Perdoneu el lapsus. El primer que us vull
Sorry
plantejar...
for the little lapse here.
Avui parlarem de xocolata, no? Llavors, primera pregunta que us faig és si sabeu el que és la xocolata.
So today we're going to talk about chocolate. My first question is, do we know what chocolate is?
Aquí hi ha una definició, Harold McGee, del llibre Food and Cooking.
Here's the Harold McGee definition in Food and Cooking.
I jo me l'he agafat com la definició científica del món culinari.
And I've taken that as the scientific definition of
I
the
aquí
culinary
teniu
world.
el que heu vist ara és una fotografia de microscopi del que explica la definició de Harold McGee.
And that's a microscopic picture of what it's there, you know, the definition, Harold's definition.
En essència, el que es diu és que la xocolata és una mescla de sucre, de cristalls de sucre i sòlids de cacau dissolts en mantega de cacau.
So the definition is that it's crystal sugar with cocoa plus cocoa butter. That's what the definition says about chocolate.
Bàsicament, culinàriament, podem dir que la xocolata és cacau i sucre.
Basically, under a culinary point of view, we can say that chocolate is cocoa and beans and sugar.
Com heu vist a la presentació, aquesta seria la foto de microscopi augmentat 100 vegades. Clar, la proporció és falsa perquè aquí s'està projectant a una mida que no coneixem.
That's the microscope picture of what chocolate is, which obviously it's false because that's
On
not the
podem
way that we
veure
see it.
les parts sòlides de cacau,
So you see
les parts
the
de sucre, dissolts en una massa de mantega de cacau.
so you see the solid parts, the cocoa solid parts with the white parts with the sugar, and then all of them in the cocoa butter.
El que us estan repartint, jo us demanaré que no us ho mengeu encara.
Please, the handout that you're receiving, do not eat it for the time being.
Un moment, no ens posem nerviosos.
Just a little, you know, just hold your horses.
Vale? A més que hem començat una mica accidentadament, però ja ho arreglarem, això, eh?
We started, you know,
Has de dir
with
quin és el que porta...
Bàsicament,
we started not in the best food, but you know, we'll repair that.
abans de continuar, us explico el que teniu. Trobareu un vaset dintre d'un altre vaset.
So I'm going to
No, perdó, no l'han posat a sobre. Vale. Aquest primer vaset transparent és apte per tothom.
Okay, so the little glass that you'll see, it's good for everybody.
El vaset petit amb una sola peça de xocolata porta fruits secs.
The chocolate inside of the little glass, it contains nuts, so be careful about that.
I a més és picant.
And on top of that, it's spicy.
Molt bé. Dit això, continuem.
That
he
said, let's continue.
Us he preguntat si sabíeu el que és la xocolata, he intentat explicar-ho d'entrada molt suaument, i ara, com que la xocolata hem dit que estava feta de cacau i sucre,
So I asked you, started the presentation with a question to see if you knew what chocolate was, and we explained it in very simple, essential terms. Now, since chocolate is a mixture of cocoa and sugar,
el sucre més o menys sabem el que és, perquè en tenim tots a casa,
so sugar, all of us know what it is because we have it at home.
però el cacau té una història una mica més especial.
So cocoa has a spiced history behind.
Per tant, comencem, i ara us pregunto si sabeu què és el cacau.
So my next question is, do you know what cocoa is?
Aquesta és la fruita de cacau,
So that's the cocoa fruit, the beans.
aquí em falten unes ballarines que ballin una mica, però bueno.
Like little dancers, they're ballerinas dancing around.
Ara us explicaré tot el procés de transformació. El que és important és que sapigueu que darrere del cacau hi ha un procés bastant particular de transformació.
Then now I'm going to tell you what the transformation process it is, but I want to know that there's a very special process behind that.
I a més, el cacau té tot un misteri darrere, és un menjar dels déus,
And since it was the food of God, there's like a mystery behind
i els déus
cocoa.
eren aquests. Aquest que heu vist ara és el déu Quetzalcoatl, que pels asteques era el déu del cacau. No?
And one of them, the Aztec king and god was the cocoa god.
Llegendes a part, comencem.
Let's put aside the legends and let's start.
Com el cacau científicament es diu Theobroma cacau, per tota aquesta llegenda d'aliment dels déus,
The tree, it's called Theobroma cacao.
Theo en grec vol dir déu,
Theo in Greek means god,
i broma, beguda.
and broma drink, as you can see.
De fet, els asteques bevien la xocolata, bevien el cacau, feien una mescla, trituraven el cacau amb aigua i espècies i se'l bevien. No?
In fact, the Aztecs were drinking cocoa usually. They were mixing it with water and spices and they were drinking it.
Molt bé.
Good.
Llavors, aquest que veieu aquí és l'arbre de cacau.
So what you see here is the cocoa tree.
És un arbre molt especial, de la família de les esterculiàcies.
It's a very special tree. It belongs to the family of
Esterculiàcies.
Sterculiacea.
La particularitat d'això, d'aquest arbre, d'aquest tipus d'arbres, és que els fruits neixen de les branques més antigues, del tronc i de les branques més antigues.
The particularity of this tree is that the fruit are born from the oldest branches and the oldest trunks of the tree.
És un arbre que té el seu origen a l'Amazònia
That the tree has its origins in the Amazons
i que avui es cultiva en una franja entre els dos tròpics.
and today it's cultivated in that stripe between the two tropics.
Perquè necessita unes condicions de temperatura i d'humitat molt especials.
Because it needs temperature and humidity, very special conditions.
Això fa que, per exemple, a Catalunya no puguem tenir arbre de cacau. Per tant, no podem controlar el producte des de casa nostra, des de l'origen.
So that means that in Catalonia we cannot grow cocoa trees, so we cannot control the product from our land.
Ni a Catalunya, ni a França, ni a Itàlia, ni als Estats Units. Per tant, no som com els cuiners que podem controlar els tomàquets des de l'hort, sinó que necessitem treballar conjuntament amb l'esforç de gent que està vivint en aquesta franja.
Nor we can do that from the United States or Italy or France, So unlike cooks in these countries where you can go to the garden, the vegetable garden and get tomatoes and control them and see how they grow, we cannot do that ourselves with cocoa.
Molt bé. Aquí tenim una mica una gràfica de consum, perquè veiem on som. Els reis...
Here's like a graphic of consumption.
Aquí què passa? What happens here? O sigui, els reis de consum de xocolata són els països centreeuropeus.
That obviously you can see the Central European countries are the kings of consumption.
Un fet és que la temperatura del país fa que es consumeixi més o menys xocolata.
A fact is that the temperature of the country makes one country eat more or less chocolate.
Té una
That we
lògica,
know.
té una lògica que Espanya o Catalunya mengem menys xocolata perquè és un país on fa calor, no?
That it makes sense in the case of Spain or Catalonia because we eat less chocolate because it's warmer.
I és lògic que països nòrdics doncs, mengin més xocolata. No?
So it's logic as well. The northern countries they eat more chocolate.
Molt bé, això només és un apunt.
So that's
I-
just like a little note here.
Del cacau, de l'arbre de cacau que us he explicat abans, hi ha 3 varietats bàsiques.
That the tree that we see before, the cocoa tree that we've seen before, there are 3 main varieties.
La primera varietat, l'original, la que es diu que té més qualitat, és el cacau criollo.
The original one, the one that it said that has more quality, it's called Criollo Coco.
Però aquest criollo coco que tant està demanat i tant està preuat i tant la gent el vol veure escrit amb una rajola de xocolata, només és l'1-2% de la producció mundial.
That it's very priced and everybody would like to see a piece of it in their hands, but it represents only 2% of the whole production.
És així perquè és el més fràgil, és el que és més sensible a les malalties, el que dona menys producció, el més fràgil.
It is that way because it's the one that yields less fruits and it's the more fragile and more vulnerable to diseases.
En canvi, el més resistent...
On the other hand, the more resistant one,
El més resistent és el forastero,
it's Forastero.
és el que dona una producció més gran, és el que és més resistent a les malalties, és el que és més comú a països com africans, per exemple, que són els que fan la major part de la producció mundial.
It's the one that is more resistant to diseases, it's the one that yields more fruits, and it's the one that is more cultivated in African countries, which these days are the ones that produce more cocoa than anyone else.
I el trinitario és el creuament d'aquests dos.
And Trinitario, it's a mixture of both of them.
Això va ser a l'illa de Trinitat, quan hi va haver unes malalties que van erradicar les plantes de cacau, es van portar a l'illa de Trinitat i allà es van fer uns creuaments.
That the name comes from the island of Trinidad, and at one point, due to some diseases, they wipe out all the trees, so they brought the 2 other types and they were mixed together.
S'ha de dir que en aquest moment hi ha cents de clons diferents de cacau estudiats per donar grans produccions per a les grans companyies. No?
And now there are hundreds of types of cocoa studied by different companies,
Molt bé.
by big companies.
El fruit de cacau és així, és com un melonet d'uns 25-40 centímetres.
That the cocoa fruit is like that. It looks like a little melon, and it's like 40 to 45 centimeters long.
Té una carcassa fibrosa
You can see like it has a shell that it's fibrous,
i a l'interior té amb 5 rimes col·locades les llavors.
and inside you can see the seeds in 5 different levels,
Amb 5 rimes.
5 levels.
I aquestes faves de cacau, que en diem, les llavors que en diem faves de cacau, avui estarem parlant de faves de cacau, no de llavors,
And in this case, we're never going to talk about seeds here. We're going to talk about beans, cocoa beans.
doncs n'hi ha unes 40-50 faves per cada fruit de cacau.
So there are more or less 40 to 50 beans per fruit.
El primer que es fa a l'hora de recollir el cacau és obrir-lo a la mateixa plantació i s'extreuen les llavors, les faves de dintre.
So what happens in the same plantation, what they do is they open the fruit and they extract and they remove the beans, the cocoa beans.
Com veieu, aquestes faves estan embolicades o estan mullades amb una pasta mucilaginosa, dolça, que fa que després es provoqui la fermentació.
So as you can see, the beans are surrounded by a gelatinous cover, and that then helps with the fermentation as well.
És un sucre que fa que els nens de la plantació doncs, agafin les faves de cacau, se les llepin, ho mengin com una llaminadura i quan se'ls ha acabat el sucre aquest llancin la fava. No?
So what it does is when you ferment them, you can lick the cocoa bean and it has like a sugary taste. And then when that goes away, you can discard it.
És un sabor molt diferent al del cacau que coneixem, un sabor més àcid, més fruital, que nosaltres no podem exportar. Ens encantaria els xocolaters poder conservar aquest sabor per fer elaboracions després, però és fràgil i només es aconsegueix a les plantacions.
It's like a taste that it's very difficult to get outside of that moment, and it's very acidic. It's an acidic taste and fruity as well, and it's very difficult to reproduce in other circumstances. It just has this moment.
Una vegada passat un control de qualitat, aquest cacau es posa en caixes o sobre el terra o de diferents maneres, però potser la manera més correcta és dins de caixes de fusta perquè fermenti.
So after a quality control, what it is, they lay them usually in boxes, especially in wooden boxes, so on the floor so it ferments.
Aquestes faves de cacau posades dintre la caixa i tapades, amb la temperatura ambient d'aquests països i els sucres que porta, fermenta.
So obviously on the floor, cover, and with the sugars that they have and the temperatures that they have in these countries, obviously they ferment.
Fermenta i provoca un canvi. Aquesta pasta blanca es va liquant, va desapareixent,
And so they ferment, and as you can see, there is a change. The white dot that was surrounding them, the gelatin, has disappeared.
i nosaltres anem veient la forma real de la fava de cacau.
And finally, you see the real shape of the cocoa bean.
Durant cada dia es van removent perquè no s'enganxin i perquè la pasta es liqui correctament.
So every day, all these cocoa beans are stirred so that they do not stick up and that they ferment correctly.
Aquesta fermentació és molt important perquè fa que es desenvolupin els sabors que conté la fava de cacau.
That fermentation process is very important because what it does is that the cocoa beans develop the flavors that we all associate with them.
És com cuinar el cacau, no? És com desenvolupar els sabors.
It's almost like cooking. It's almost like developing their flavors.
És una part essencial de la bona qualitat que puguem tenir després amb una rajola de xocolata.
It's an essential part that then can yield, like a very nice chocolate bar.
Un cop ha passat el procés de fermentació, que sol durar uns 6-7 dies,
Once that fermentation process is over, which usually takes between 5 and 6 days,
es posa a secar.
so they get to, they dry them out.
Es pot secar de moltes maneres, de forma mecànica, amb túnels d'alta temperatura, en forns
There
o
are-
a temperatura ambient.
There are many different ways to do it, in ovens, mechanically, but all of them have to be at the room temperature.
En aquest cas, el cacau aquest que veieu està sobre un secador que es diu, que està calentat per sota amb un foc de llenya.
So here in this case, what you see is they are drying in a dryer, and underneath there is like a fire made with wood.
Això a lleu temperatura.
Yeah, at room temperature, yes.
Aquest procés també és important perquè ens pot donar un sabor de fumat al cacau. El que interessa és que no ens el dongui, que el assecat sigui el més neutre possible.
That is a very important step as well, because it could give a very smoky flavor that we don't want or we don't seek when we do that. So the way to do it is trying to avoid that smokiness.
Finalment, acabem tenint les faves de cacau que nosaltres rebem per fer xocolata.
So the end product is the cocoa beans that we receive so we can start making chocolate.
Si voleu,
ourselves.
podeu començar a provar. Trobareu una fava de cacau a dintre el vaset.
So the first thing that I want you to taste inside of the handout, it's like a fava bean that you'll find inside.
Aquesta fava és una fava torrada.
So it's a toasted cocoa bean.
El que heu de fer aquesta fava és pelar-la.
So what you need to do is to peel it out.
Sí, exacte.
Busca, sisplau,
Pelar-la,
busca.
pelar-la.
Enric,
Take off the peel.
Enric, busca'n una i ensenya'ls.
Ah, sí. És com una ametlla.
So it looks like an almond.
El que heu de fer és pelar-la.
What you need to do is to peel it out.
Idealment hauríeu de treure un petit germen que té perquè és una textura dura i és desagradable.
So at the bottom of it, you'll find like a germ, what we call a germ, and you should remove that because it has like a thicker texture and it's not that pleasant to your teeth.
Què tal? Us agrada?
What do you think? Do you
Sí?
like it?
Bé, el que esteu menjant és una fava de cacau de São Tomé i Príncipe, concretament.
The fava bean that you're eating now comes from São Tomé, the island of São Tomé and Prince.
És una fava d'una producció molt petita,
It comes from a very small production
on s'elaboren uns lots molt petits i molt controlats,
where you have like batches that are very small and very controlled.
i nosaltres considerem que tenen un sabor molt net de cacau,
we consider that they have a very clean taste of cocoa.
no existeixen sabors de fumat i el sabor és agradable.
They don't have smoky flavors and the taste is very pleasant.
Exactament és com si us haguéssiu menjat una xocolata 100% cacau.
It's like if you were eating a 100% cocoa chocolate.
Molt bé, continuem.
Let's continue.
Com es fa la xocolata?
How is the chocolate made?
Exacte, change. és a Catalan traduction, esta.
It's a Catalan translation.
Es pot pujar una mica més?
Sí, it's possible.
The volume
Molt
a little
bé,
bit up.
aquí veureu una mica com es fabrica la xocolata a partir del cacau.
So here you can see how.
Primer el cacau es torra,
So first of all, the cocoa is roasted,
es tritura, es fa es mol,
milled, grounding,
i es transforma en pasta de cacau.
and then it becomes a cocoa paste.
Aquesta pasta de cacau, si la posem en una premsa, com aquesta,
If you put it in a press like that,
aconseguim els dos derivats de cacau que ens falten, que és la mantega de cacau
so we get the two things that we still need, the cocoa butter
i el cacau en pols.
and the cocoa powder.
Que el cacau en pols és l'extracte sec que ens queda després de prensar la pasta de cacau i haver extret l'oli.
So after pressing the cocoa bean and removing the oil, that's what's left, the cocoa powder.
Aquests ingredients es mixen per fer xocolata,
So we mix all these ingredients to get
junt amb
chocolate,
el sucre i la llet en pols, si és necessari,
and obviously along with the sugar and the powder milk as needed.
es fa tot aquest procés que hem explicat,
So we have the tempering process as well.
i a partir d'aquí aconseguim tenir les xocolates.
And here we get chocolate.
Molt ràpid, no? Ha sigut això?
Okay, so it's gone very fast.
Tornem.
Probably.
Reprenem el cacau.
So we go back to the cocoa beans.
Aquest cacau el torrem, el convertim en trossets petits de cacau torrat.
So we get the cocoa again, and those are cocoa. They become cocoa nibs.
Això seria més o menys el que us heu menjat.
So that's more or less what you ate now.
Això ho triturem i ho convertim en pasta de cacau.
So we ground it, and it becomes like a cocoa paste.
Seria una xocolata 100% de cacau.
So it would be like 100% chocolate, cocoa chocolate.
Com heu vist, si això ho premsem, en aconseguim els dos derivats bàsics.
So if we press it, we have the two different elements, cocoa butter and cocoa powder.
I ja tenim els tres ingredients bàsics per fer tots els derivats de xocolata.
So we have the three basic ingredients to make every single variation on chocolate.
Molt bé, si amb aquests tres ingredients ens fa falta tenir dos ingredients més, que són el sucre i la llet en pols.
So there are two more that we're going to add from now, so sugar and powdered milk.
Llavors, per fer xocolata negra, el primer que necessitem, per fer una xocolata negra 70% de cacau, el primer que necessitem, què seria?
So what do you think that would be the first thing that we need to make a dark chocolate, which is 70% cocoa?
Seria? Ok.
Right.
60% coco.
So 60% cocoa
La
powder.
primera pregunta és que aquí tenim un 70 i aquí tenim un 60, no?
So there's still.
Molt bé.
Discrepancy
Segon ingredient
here.
que necessitem,
So
quin
what
és?
else we need?
Sugar.
Sugar.
I el tercer ingredient que necessitem,
And the third ingredient.
com que tenim de base tenim una pasta de cacau que és densa,
So that's the paste is very dense here. What else we need?
tenim sòlid,
So something solid.
necessitem alguna per liquar tot això. No?
So need something to liquefy all of that.
Agua no.
No, not water.
Si tenim un 70% i 60, falta cocoa butter, no?
So we need cocoa powder, and that makes the 70%.
Amigo. Ok, vale. Milk chocolate. És diferent.
So milk chocolate is different, as you can see.
Tenim un 12% de pasta de cacau,
12% chocolate paste,
28% de mantega de cacau,
28% cocoa butter.
que si sumem 28 i 12,
So if you add them up,
Sí, no?
Arithmetics.
Sucre i llet en pols.
Sugar and powdered milk.
I això era fàcil. Ara, algú sap quin ingredient porta la xocolata blanca?
So far, so good. Let's see, who knows what's the main ingredient for white chocolate?
Hòstia,
Mantega de
Yeah.
cacao?
30%.
Okay, so 30% cocoa
Exact. The
butter.
next? Sugar. In the next? Okay. Perfecte, molt bé.
Good, perfect.
Aquests ingredients, com heu vist al vídeo, es mixen, es refinen, es conxen i es temperen.
So as you've seen in the video, these elements, these ingredients, what we do is we mix them, we refine them, we conch them, and we temper
Això d'aquí, conching,
conching.
és una paraula clàssica del món de la xocolata. És una màquina inventada expressament per elaborar xocolata que es diu conxa.
And it's a special word that it's only used that I'm aware in the chocolate world. And it's a machine that does that job.
Val? Molt bé. I tempering,
And the other one, the big one, is tempering here.
que és el que ha explicat el professor.
So that's what our teacher has
I ara,
explained today.
permiso, lo vuelvo a explicar.
And now with your permission, I'm going to re-explain it.
No tan bien, eh?
Perhaps not as well as you did.
Ok. Molt bé, tempering. Cristalls.
So here are the little crystals.
Si no és correcte, debatim una mica, eh?
So if it's not correct, we can argue about that.
Okay. Hi ha diverses maneres de temperar la xocolata. En
Yeah, there's-
essència, tot és el mateix, és refredar i recalentar per aconseguir una cristal·lització òptima.
So what it is, there are many different ways to temper chocolate, but mainly what they are, it's to bring down the temperature and then to raise it so all the crystals solidify.
Més o menys, també? Vale.
So how did they do?
Ok. Això, si agafem mantega de cacau temperada, solidifica ràpidament.
So if we get cocoa butter, it solidifies quickly, very quickly.
Però si no està temperada, tarda molt temps.
So if it's untempered, it takes
I
a long time.
l'estructura és llisa o amorfa. No?
So and as you can see, the textures are completely different.
Molt bé. Per
One
tant,
is flat, the other one.
el procés de temperat consisteix en aconseguir que la mantega de cacau cristal·litzi de la forma correcta.
Okay. So that's what it means, to get the cocoa butter to crystallize in the right way.
Per què diem de la forma correcta?
Why do we use the expression the right way?
Bàsicament perquè la mantega de cacau, que està formada per triglicèrids, pot cristal·litzar de 6 maneres diferents.
Why do we say the correct way? Because cocoa butter, which is made out of triglycerides, can crystallize in 6 different ways.
La primera forma, hi ha dos nomenclatures per parlar dels cristalls de la mantega de cacau. Una és amb números, l'altra és amb lletres.
That there are 2 different ways, terminology to describe the crystallization. The first one is by numbers, using numbers. The second one by letters.
La que ens convé quan treballem amb xocolata és les formes 5 i 6.
The ones that we need, the ones that we seek when we work with chocolate, it's number 5 and number 6.
Perquè són les més estables.
Because they are the more stable ones.
Molt bé. Això vol dir que nosaltres, vostès, quan comprin xocolata al supermercat o a la xocolateria,
So that means that when you buy chocolate in the supermarket or in the chocolate store,
i estigui estocada, i estigui idealment fabricada, estigui tot en condicions ideals, a 20 graus centígrads,
so it's stock and it's produced in an ideal temperature, which would be 20 degrees Celsius.
només en la xocolata que comprin, que estarà temperada, només hi haurà les formes 5 i 6.
So it'll be already tempered and it'll be only the form 5 and 6.
Aquestes formes no hi seran.
these other forms, they won't be there.
Per què? Perquè el fabricant de xocolata ha temperat la xocolata i ha provocat que només hi siguin les estables.
Why? Because the chocolate manufacturer has tempered already chocolate so that they are only remains the two stable forms.
Molt bé, què passa si nosaltres fonem la xocolata a 45 graus?
What happens if we melt the chocolate at 45 degrees?
Desapareixen els cristalls, no hi ha cristalls.
The crystals disappear.
La forma primera ha desaparegut entre 16 i 18 graus.
So the first form has disappeared between 16 and 18 degrees Celsius.
La segona entre 22 i 24.
The second one
La
between
tercera
22.
24 i 26. Pam. Visual, no? Molt bé. Ara, què passa si agafem aquesta xocolata fosa a 45 graus? Per què 45 graus?
And then what happens if we get that melted chocolate at 45 degrees Celsius? Why 45 degrees Celsius?
Per què? Perquè ens assegurem que tots els cristalls estiguin fosos.
Because we want to make sure that all the crystals have melted.
Què passa si agafem aquesta... Ara imagineu-vos que tenim xocolata fosa, com aquesta.
Let's imagine that we have melted chocolate.
Imagineu que aquesta xocolata estigui a 45 graus i la deixem aquí, a una temperatura ambient de 20 graus.
So what would happen if we have, let's imagine that's 45 degrees Celsius, what would happen if the room temperature is at 20 degrees Celsius?
Baixem a 20 graus.
So it goes down.
I què passa? Que tenim, al cap de moltes hores, perquè seria molt lenta la cristal·lització, tindríem cristalls de tots els tipus.
So what will happen is that after many hours, because it would take a long time for that to happen, but we have all sorts of crystals.
Tindríem
left.
cristalls de la forma 1, però estarien fosos perquè estarien per al punt de fusió 16-18 graus.
We would have the form 1 crystals, but they would be melted because it would be under 20 degrees Celsius.
Tindríem tots, i hem dit abans, que només ens interessen aquests.
And we would have all of them, but remember that we said at the beginning that we just want form 5 and 6.
Tots aquests no els volem.
So all of these, we don't want them.
Per tant, en aquesta cristal·lització tindríem una diversitat d'estructura de cristalls que faria que fos una textura poc, no trobo la paraula tècnica, poc...
Agradable.
Una estructura amorfa, no? Una estructura poc... Sí, exacte, això mateix.
Yes.
Molt bé.
So that with all the other crystals, it would be like an unpleasant texture. It would be like an amorphous texture.
No seria textura brillant de la xocolata que estem acostumats, no faria el crec de la xocolata.
We would miss the shine of the chocolate that we are used to.
Ens
We
quedaria
wouldn't get the crack.
Ens quedaria una textura terrosa.
It would be like a sandy texture as well.
Exacte.
And
Ens
so on.
quedaria un color blanquinós.
It would be whitish.
Hi hauria una migració de mantega de cacau en estat líquid.
And it would be like a migration of cocoa butter to a liquid state.
Seria un desastre.
It would be a disaster.
Això és el que passa si vostès se'n van a comprar una rajola de xocolata al mercat.
That's what happens if you go to the supermarket and you get a chocolate bar
Al mes d'agost,
in August,
la posen al cotxe,
and you leave it in your car,
la deixen tot el dia,
and you leave it there the whole day,
quan arriben a casa la posen a la nevera
and then when you arrive home and you put it in the fridge,
i el resultat és això.
and that's the result.
Vostès han fos la xocolata i l'han solidificat de forma brusca, amb baixa temperatura, sense temperar-la prèviament.
So what you've done is that you bring the temperature down in a very abrupt way without tempering it.
Molt bé. I queda blanca, queda malament.
So it's whitish and it doesn't look good.
Per solucionar aquest problema, el que hem de fer és tornar a fondre la xocolata.
So to solve this problem, what we have to do is to melt the chocolate again, once again.
Destruir tots els cristalls que havíem creat.
So to destroy all the crystals that we had created previously.
I llavors fer el procés de temperat.
And then after that, doing the tempering.
El procés de temperat consisteix en aconseguir tenir nuclis de cristal·lització de la forma 5, que és la que ens interessa.
So what it means by tempering, it's to create, in other words, to create crystals of the form 5, which is the one that we seek. And we
Per tant,
want.
el que fem és refredar la xocolata de forma ràpida.
So what we do is we bring down the temperature of the chocolate in a very quick manner
A 28 graus.
at 28 degrees.
Per què? Perquè 28 graus és quan estem per sota del punt de fusió de la forma 5.
So why 28? Because we're still under the melting point for form 5.
Però tenim un problema, que creant aquest cristall de la forma 5 se'ns han creat també part d'aquests d'aquí.
So the problem that we have is that by doing so and creating the crystal, we got others as well from the others.
Ara el màgic seria quedar-nos només amb aquest i destruir aquests.
The magical part would be to just keep number 5 and get rid of the rest.
I com ho aconseguim?
So
Doncs
how do we accomplish that?
ho aconseguim pujant la temperatura una mica fins al límit aquest.
So what we do is to bring up the temperature a little bit to that limit, to the form 5 limit.
Fins a 31 graus.
So let's say to 31 degrees Celsius.
D'aquesta manera destruïm aquests cristalls
So in that way we destroy these crystals
i només mantenim aquests.
and we just keep the form 5 one.
Tenim nuclis de cristal·lització de la forma 5.
The crystallization nuclei are only the ones for form 5.
Encara la xocolata està en estat líquid. Tenim nuclis de cristal·lització, forma 5 cristal·litzada i forma 5 xocolata fosa.
So we have the crystals, but the chocolate is still melted.
Si ara aquesta xocolata, un cop temperada, la refredem a 20 graus, tindrem xocolata correctament solidificada amb la forma 5.
So if we temper the chocolate and we bring it down to 20 degrees, what we'll have the crystals from form 5
I la forma 6,
and form 6 as well.
que la forma 6 només es genera a partir de la forma 5.
And form 6 just takes place from form 5.
La cosa curiosa és que la forma 6 produeix una contracció de la xocolata.
The thing is, the curious thing here is that form 6, what it does is like a contraction of the chocolate.
I a la llarga del temps produeix fat bloom. Fat bloom. Fat bloom és una paraula, en diem, és migració de greix a l'exterior de la...
So what it does at the end is like migration of the fat part.
Sí? Más o menos? Sorry. Ok. Ara, què podem fer amb xocolata?
So now, what can we do with chocolate?
Bàsicament podem fer dues coses.
Basically, we can do two things.
La primera cosa són textures. Ha parlat també el professor.
The first part is like texture. The first thing that we can do is textures. David has talked about that.
Cremes, flams,
Creams, flams,
trufes,
truffles,
mousse de xocolata.
mousse,
O podem fer formes.
or we can do shapes, forms.
Shapes. Shapes són tot.
Shapes is,
Des d'una rajola de xocolata
shapes is everything from a chocolate bar,
dragés,
dragées,
o el que vostès vulguin,
or whatever you wish.
el que la imaginació dongui de si, no?
Imagination is the limit.
El que vulgueu.
Whatever you want.
Ous. El més comú que fem als xocolaters és peces de Pasqua.
Eggs and chocolatiers, what we make very often, it's Eastern arrangements or pieces.
Coses.
Things.
Tot igual, eh? Bueno, aniríem fent, ara, eh?
And so on.
Aquest que esteu veient és un ou fos amb els raigs del sol.
Okay.
Amb els raigs del sol.
So the one that you see is an egg melted with the sun rays.
Si a la millor heu pogut veure un vídeo que està per internet de l'Anthony Bourdain, que va venir a casa i va fer un reportatge de com fem ous de Pasqua. I
Qui ho va fer,
Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, Anthony Bourdain was at home and he made a,
Aquests ous de
documentary
Pasqua
on how we
especials,
deal with that.
és una tècnica que vam desenvolupar nosaltres, que consisteix en posar els ous de xocolata al sol perquè es fonguin i creïn aquestes formes artístiques.
That's our technique, and we show it to him. For Easter, the Easter eggs, what we do is we let them melt with the sun rays, and they become, the end product is with all these artistic shapes.
Us he parlat de dues coses, textures i shapes, no? I formes.
I've been talking to you about two things, textures and shapes.
Les textures són les que aporten l'elasticitat que parlava el professor, però per fer aquestes textures sempre necessitem altres ingredients.
That for
La majoria de les vegades que volem fer textures necessitem incorporar altres ingredients a la xocolata.
So textures are the ones that, as David has mentioned, that the ones that bring that elasticity to chocolate. But to accomplish this, what we need to do is to bring other ingredients into chocolate.
Per fer una mousse de xocolata necessitem incorporar una nata, uns ous.
To do a chocolate mousse, we need to incorporate eggs, cream.
Per fer una trufa necessitem incorporar nata o altres ingredients.
Truffles, we need to incorporate cream and other ingredients.
Però la xocolata, en estat pur, normalment té una estructura poc elàstica o gens elàstica.
So chocolate in a pure state doesn't have an elastic structure or not elastic at all, actually.
Normalment tenim només un punt d'elasticitat quan està mig solidificada.
So we just have an elasticity point a very short time when it's solidifying.
Ara ho he fet una mica d'estemps, però bueno, temperarem xocolata.
So what we're going to do now here is we're going to temper some chocolate.
Aquesta xocolata l'hem fos abans, però amb la temperatura ambient s'ha refredat una mica.
So we melted it before, but with the room temperature it has gone down a little bit.
La millor manera de fondre la xocolata no és al microones.
The best way to melt chocolate is not through a microwave.
La xocolata necessita ser fosa a una temperatura lleu, que no superi mai els 50-55 graus.
It has to do like a very light temperature that it's never over 50-55 degrees Celsius.
I sobretot d'una manera controlada.
And especially in a very controlled manner.
Aquí evidentment no controlem res.
Here we cannot control anything.
Però bé. I el més fàcil que pot passar és que es cremi.
That the most common occurrence is that it would burn.
Perquè la calor es concentra en un punt del perol de xocolata.
So what happens is with microwave heat concentrates in one point of the chocolate.
I si no anem en compte, doncs pot ser que aquesta calor concentrada faci que es cremi la xocolata.
And if we don't pay attention, what that heat does, it burns the chocolate.
Molt bé, doncs ara aquesta xocolata farem tot allò que he explicat abans tan avorrit, no?
So with the chocolate we're going to do all the things that I explained so far that were very, very boring.
Però bueno, ara imagineu-vos, no sé si ho és veritat, perquè tinc termòmetre, però bueno, aquí estem a 19,9, ostres, perfecte, 20 graus centímetres. Temperatura ambient és ideal.
Let's see, here we're in a temperature, I don't know if I explained that before, but the room temperature is at 19.5, actually 20 degrees Celsius,
Molt
which
bé.
is ideal.
Què volíem fer? Volíem refredar aquesta xocolata de 45 graus, baixar-la a 28 graus, no?
So what we wanted to do, what we want to accomplish here is to bring that the temperature of the melted chocolate to 28 degrees.
Com ho fem? Això està fred, és un marbre.
So how do we accomplish that? We have a piece of marble here and it's cold.
Llavors el que fem és posar la xocolata a refredar sobre una superfície freda.
So what we do is we pour the chocolate on a cold surface.
Però mantenim aquí una part de la xocolata a temperatura calenta.
So what we do at the same time, we keep some chocolate in the bowl at a higher temperature.
Molt bé. Ara aquesta xocolata, la cosa seria refredar-la a 28 graus i llavors mesclar-la amb aquesta que està calenta i aconseguir els 31.
So the idea here would be to temper and to mix the chocolate here, so we bring it down to 28 degrees, and then bring it back to the bowl, so then it rises back to 31, which is the one that we seek.
Dit d'una altra manera, aquí crear les formes de cristall que ens interessen.
So explain in a different manner, here we create the shapes of crystal that we seek.
Perdona, però és que després, bueno, és igual. I llavors, al juntar-la amb la xocolata calenta, quedar-nos només amb la que ens interessa.
So, and then when we bring it back to the bowl with the warmer chocolate,
Ara
to
això,
keep the ones that we want.
nosaltres
the
ho fem
crystals that we want.
per visualment, ja ho veiem,
So visually we can see when it's ready.
Però bueno, aquí ara estem a 25, 26, jo diria que ja ho tenim.
So it here's at 25, 26, I think that it's almost ready.
Ja ho tenim. Llavors el que fem és assegurar-nos que això tingui una temperatura regular.
So what we do is that it has like a, all across temperature.
Molt bé, això ja ho tenim. I ara això ho vaig a posar cap aquí, això cap aquí.
So what I'm going to do now,
Ara això ho barrejo.
so I'm going to mix that in the bowl.
I ja ho tenim.
And it's done.
Aquí, com podeu veure, ja tenim parts sòlides, totalment sòlides.
As you can see here, we have solid parts, completely solidified parts.
Ara hem de remenar això.
So now we need to mix that together.
Quedar-nos amb els bons cristalls,
So with all the crystals.
unificar la temperatura
To unify the temperature as well, that's the other goal here.
i començar a treballar.
And we can start working with that again.
El bo seria comprovar que ho hem fet bé.
So the good thing would be to make sure that we've done it correctly.
Es veu?
Sí,
Mira, pràcticament, no?
almost. Ara.
Prou. Va. Bueno, hi ha un marge, de fet ho he fet bastant bé.
There's an error margin as
Hi ha
well.
un marge de temperatura. De fet, cada fabricant de xocolata, els embalatges, posa el rang de la seva cobertura.
In fact, every chocolate manufacturer sends the chocolate and they tell you the range of, the margin of error.
Llavors, per exemple, si ara fem aquí, posem una mica de xocolata aquí, espera't.
So if now we put some,
Veieu? Això ja està sòlid.
this part, as you can see, the one on the marble, it's already has already
Tenim
solidified.
una palatina per aquí? No, Una espatulina? Vale. Molt bé, doncs ara si posem una mica de xocolata aquí,
So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a little chocolate here.
molt bé.
Good.
Ara això és elàstic, no?
So you can see that
Sí.
it has elasticity, it's elastic.
Molt bé. Ara d'aquí, si ho hem fet bé tot, d'aquí un minut, 2 minuts, ja no serà elàstic. Ja no tenim elasticitat.
So that if we've done our job correctly, in a minute or two, it would lose all the elasticity.
De moment ho deixarem assecar aquí
So we're going to let it dry here.
i continuarem.
So let's proceed.
Ara, ho tenim aquí, això? Ah, sí, ara entrem en el món de les textures, val? A través d'Alicia.
So now we're going to enter the wall of textures through the Alicia Foundation.
El que hem fet fa anys que estem col·laborant amb la Fundació Alicia, diversos pastissers,
So what we've done for years, several pastry chefs, we've been working and collaborating with the Alicia Foundation
per desenvolupar un formulari de les diferents elaboracions de pastisseria, o sigui, per reestudiar totes les elaboracions de pastisseria.
to, in a way, to restudy or to rethink about every single classic pastry preparation.
Al món de la pastisseria, igual que a la cuina, doncs hi ha molts receptaris, hi ha moltes receptes desenvolupades des del punt de vista empíric.
So, as you know, in the pastry world, there are lots of recipes and lots of them have been developed in an empirical way.
Normalment la gent parla o diu que la pastisseria és molt més exacta que la cuina.
So most people say that pastry, the art of the pastry, is much more exact or precise than food, for instance, than cooking.
Però en canvi nosaltres creiem que no és així.
But we don't think that that's the case.
Creiem que la diferència és que nosaltres tenim uns productes molt més regulars.
But the thing that we think that the difference is that we work with products that are much more regular.
Per exemple, el sucre, la xocolata, la farina,
So let's say sugar, chocolate, flour.
són molt més regulars que els tomàquets, pollastre.
In a way, they're more regular or homogeneous than tomatoes, chicken.
Per tant, nosaltres podem treballar amb unes receptes sempre iguales, perquè els ingredients pràcticament sempre són els mateixos.
So in a way, we have to work always with the same type of recipe because the ingredients do not change. They're always the same.
En canvi, en cuina no poden tenir una recepta exacta perquè han de modificar segons la naturalesa dels ingredients.
So in the savory world, in savory cuisine, they cannot have a precise recipe because they have to improvise every time because the ingredients do change.
Semi-elàstic
Semi-elastic now.
Semi-elàstic i one moment i no elàstic ja. Ok, vale, això.
As we were
Llavors,
saying,
aquesta genteta d'aquí,
so all the people that you see here,
Pere Castells,
Pere Castells,
Ramon Morató, que va venir aquí l'any passat,
Ramon Morató, which was here
la
last
Ingrid
year,
Ferrer, que està aquí,
Ingrid Ferrer, here with us,
Eloís, que va estar l'any passat aquí també,
Eloise, which was here last
i
year,
altres pastissers, Josep Maria Ribé, i el Rubén Álvarez, i jo, que estic
Ruben
fent la foto.
Alvarez, myself,
Doncs hem fet tot això, no? Hem fet,
so a bunch of pastry chefs.
hem
Here
fet
they
tot
are.
això que consisteix en, primerament, el que vam fer va ser mirar tots els receptaris que vam poder i analitzar les receptes que hi havia.
So the first step here was to do a survey of all the existing recipes, all the recipes that we could get a hold of for the different preparations.
Normalment estan agrupades de diferents maneres als llibres de receptaris.
So they are grouped in different ways in recipe books.
Normalment doncs, masses de llevat, masses fermentades,
So fermented using yeast,
cremes,
Creams.
pans de pessic,
sponge cakes.
per agrupacions en termes culinaris.
So grouped by culinary interest or.
A nosaltres se'ns va ocórrer analitzar-ho des del punt de vista de les textures.
So what we thought it would be a good departing point for us is to start with the texture,
I crear
with the wall of textures.
un marc on anar col·locant totes les elaboracions que coneixíem.
And in that frame to put all the different, dishes that we that we knew of.
El primer que vam fer va ser crear unes 3 parts. La primera part és textures líquides,
So 3 parts at the beginning, we separate things in 3 parts. The first one was liquid textures,
textures gasoses
gaseous textures,
i textures sòlides.
and solid textures.
Llavors, dintre les textures líquides sí, podem tenir líquids o cremes.
And in the first one, for instance, in liquid textures, we could have liquids or creams.
Dintre les textures gasoses,
Gaseous
esponges, espumes, inflades
Foams,
i seques.
and the ones that need liquid and the ones that are dry.
I les textures sòlides podem tenir gelatines,
And the solid ones, we could have gelatin,
textures tendres i cruixents.
tender and crispy.
Per exemple, una crema pastissera estaria aquí.
Like a pastissier cream, which one would it be?
Una sponge cake seria això.
And the sponge cake would be there.
I un flam aquí.
And a flan would be there.
Això va ser el que hem fet i a partir d'aquí hem anat estudiant cada part per trobar la millor recepta.
So what we've done, that was the departing point, and from there what we've done is to study each one of them to find the best recipe
Però com que
possible.
avui parlem de xocolata,
So today, since we're talking about chocolate,
us haig de dir que a l'únic lloc que hi ha xocolata,
so I can tell you that the only place,
de forma essencial,
in an essential way, the only place where we have chocolate,
però en canvi la xocolata es pot posar gairebé a tot arreu.
but actually that's the essential one with truffles, but you could put chocolate in many of the other dishes.
Podem fer una cookie de xocolata,
You can make cookies with chocolate,
podem fer un cake de xocolata,
cake,
un xarop de xocolata, un
syrup.
sirup,
Yeah, syrup.
Va, de tot.
Yeah.
Llavors, això serien les textures tradicionals.
Those were the traditional textures.
I el que hem fet després de fer això és intentar canviar els ingredients per millorar o per buscar vies alternatives de la mateixa textura.
So what we've done, those were the traditional textures. What we've done at Delicia is to change or incorporate different elements to seek the best texture that each dish could bring.
Ara la Ingrid us farà una demostració de com podem fer un flam.
Now Ingrid is going to show you how to make a flan.
Digues els ingredients tu.
Val. Llavors, el flam tradicional més o menys. Podríem tenir 1.000 receptes, però una podria ser aquesta.
So for a traditional flan, we could have 1,000 recipes, but one could be this one here.
Amb llet, ous, sucre, xocolata.
So milk, eggs, sugar, chocolate.
I l'Alicia Flan
The flan made at the Alicia Foundation.
ens pots explicar el que porta.
So Ingrid is going to take it over.
Afegim aigua,
So what we do, we start with water.
sucre,
Sugar.
un carregenat, que és un texturitzant que
Carrageen,
dona aquesta textura cremosa que ens podria donar els ous i la llet.
So Carrageen, what it does is that it brings that creamy texture that we would accomplish with egg yolks and milk.
Ups. Degut a la demanda social en la que hi ha problemes amb les intoleràncies i al·lèrgies amb la llet i l'ou, el que es fa a la Fundació Alicia, treballant amb l'equip de nutrició, és adaptar-nos a escollir receptes tradicionals i canviar-les i donar capacitat a poder menjar amb gent amb intoleràncies i al·lèrgies.
So one of the principles that we have at the Alicia Foundation is knowing that there are lots of people that these days that have food allergies, especially to eggs or milk products. What we try to do is to recreate the traditional recipes, but avoiding these products.
Aquí tenim l'aigua, l'hem escalfat,
So we've heating the water here,
i hem afegit el sucre
adding sugar,
i el carregenat.
I el carregenat.
carrageen as well.
El que hem fet bàsicament amb aquest flam és potenciar el sabor de xocolata.
So what we've done with this flan is to bring the flavor of chocolate up front.
Com he dit abans, per fer una textura amb xocolata, com pot ser un flam,
So as I said before, to make a texture with chocolate, as in a flan,
hem d'incorporar altres ingredients.
we have to bring other ingredients.
Habitualment, aquests ingredients distorsionen el sabor original de la xocolata.
What happens when we do that is that distort a little bit the flavor of the chocolate.
Si afegim ous, tenim gust de xocolata i ous. Si afegim llet, nata, tenim gust de xocolata i nata.
So if we add eggs, we have the end taste is that of chocolate and eggs. If we add cream, the final taste is going to be chocolate and cream.
Si afegim aigua,
If we bring water,
normalment potenciem el sabor de la xocolata.
so what we do is we bring the taste of chocolate up front.
Per tant, en aquesta recepta, a part de millorar aspectes, com ha comentat ella, d'intoleràncies, el que fem és aconseguir un flam amb un sabor de xocolata més elevat.
So besides avoiding food allergies and intolerances that people are having these days, what we do by using water is that the chocolate taste becomes much more intense.
Hem afegit la xocolata
We added the chocolate now,
i ja tindríem la mescla per fer el flam.
so we have here the mixture to make a flan.
Es posaria a la nevera, com qualsevol flam,
So then we would refrigerate it like with any flan.
perquè
Hem de dir que primer que el flam tradicional s'hauria de coure per coagular l'ou i aconseguir la gelificació. En aquest cas no cal coure-ho, només
cous
bullir la llet.
l'aigua per també treballi el carregenat, aquest que és d'origen alga, una alga que dona la capacitat de gelificar.
The thing is that with a traditional flan, what you would do is you would need to cook the eggs so everything coagulates together and binds together. Here, the only thing that we have to do is to bring up a little bit the temperature so the carrageen can mix. And remember, the carrageen comes from algae.
El que hem de fer només és posar-ho dintre un motlle de silicona, de terrissa, del que vulguem,
And then the only thing that we have to do is to fill up a mold with that, a silicone mold or clay mold, whatever you want.
i com deia ella, és posar-ho a la nevera.
And as Ingrid said, then refrigerate it.
Però com que no tenim la nevera, això ho he pres dels cuiners. Jo sóc científica i això és el primer que vaig aprendre als cuiners. Fer alguna
Fer trampes.
trampilla.
So there are the scientific part, but that's the first part that I learned from cooks.
Ara el que podem fer és desemmotllar el flam.
Now we're going to mold the flan.
I veureu que aconseguim una textura gelatinosa, amb
And
molt de
you'll
sabor de xocolata.
You will see that we have accomplished a gelatinous texture.
És a texture.
Ha quedat bé, això?
Sí.
That was good.
Ah.
It worked well.
Elasticity,
Texture is well and the flour i el gust també és bo. Vull dir, no
Not
només la
only looks
textura.
good, but the flavor is very good. as
Algú
well.
vol provar-ho?
Someone wants to try it?
Sí o no? Ara falta culleres. Allà. Mira, culleres, aquí.
És un gust molt més fort de xocolata de lo normal perquè porta l'aigua, no? Però és el que volen molts
Ha sigut
els
ella
que els
primer.
agrada la xocolata.
It is a stronger taste of chocolate than the traditional one because, as we said, it has water.
Molt bé. I a més aquest flam, què passa? Que nutricionalment canvia lleugerament algun valor.
That, as you can see, the other advantage of this flan is that, under a nutritional point of view, it brings down
Es baixa l'energia,
the energy goes down as well.
encara que hem posat bastanta xocolata més.
Even if I use much more chocolate,
I a més aconseguim que, que no sigui restrictiu per les dietes de llet i ous.
and then people that do have milk and egg allergies do not need to fear.
Què tal, el flam? Perfecte? No, foriu. Molt bé. Passem al proper exemple,
So let's go for the second example.
sponge cake.
So sponge cake.
Vale?
Aquí la idea també és el mateix, agafar una recepta tradicional i adaptar-la a un problema, en aquest cas social, sobre la intolerància al gluten.
So here the idea is the same, to take a traditional recipe as a sponge cake and then to adapt it to a very prevalent problem these days, which is like a gluten allergies.
En aquest cas hi ha aquí una mescla de cacao, farina sense gluten i llevat químic.
And so here we have a mixture of cocoa, gluten-free flour. I què més? Llevat de què?
I baking powder,
Oh, sí.
llevat químic.
And yeast.
Llevat químic, sí.
Yep, yeast.
Per cert, és que els que vulgueu menjar una mica de xocolata, la que porta el sobret us la deixo menjar.
So now, for the ones that cannot wait to eat more chocolate, I'm going to allow you to have the one that has a wrap.
És que me n'havia oblidat que teníeu xocolata davant.
I completely forgot that you had the whole thing with chocolate in your hands.
Sabeu què passa? Que ho tinc tan assumit ja que no...
Seems that it's second nature for me.
Menjareu una xocolata 70% de cacau,
So you're going to eat a chocolate that's made, it's 70% cocoa,
amb un toc d'acidesa que dona la fava de cacau de Madagascar,
with a little acidity that comes from the cocoa bean that comes from Madagascar.
Com tenim això?
Bé,
Hem barrejat els ous amb la farina, el cacau,
So we mix the eggs with the cocoa and the gluten-free flour and yeast.
i ara el que farem és posar-ho dins un motlle per
So we're going
coure-ho
to mold it now.
per coure-ho al microones.
And we're going to cook it in the microwave, believe it or not.
És un pa de pessic que podem fer en 3 minuts.
So it's a sponge cake that can be done with 3 minutes.
Molt ràpid.
Very, very quick.
En un cas d'emergència, per exemple, avui aquí qui fa l'aniversari,
So in an emergency, let's say, who has a birthday today?
o sigui, jo puc fer un pastís en 3 minuts. Mira, aquest senyor
I can make you a birthday cake in
Go.
3 minutes.
A veure si em poden portar una espelma, algú, sisplau.
The only thing that we need is a candle.
Bueno, mentre coem, hem posat el pa de pessic dintre el motlle, 3 minuts,
So what we've done is we put it in a mold in the microwave for 3 minutes.
I aquests 3 minuts veieu que això ja ho tindríem, eh?
So with these 3 minutes, you can see that that's lost
Ara,
the elasticity.
for you. Ara, elasticity, encara, un poco, una mica.
Okay?
Però es pot trencar.
Yeah, you can break it. You can
Però
break
ara,
it.
si fem així, hi ha elasticitat, perquè és molt prim i encara té una mica d'elasticitat pel poc gruix que té.
So it has still a little, it retains a little bit of elasticity because, as you can see, it's very thin.
Però ara, si anem... Clec.
But it cracks.
El clec aquest és el... Tinc el micro per aquí, veiem. On està? Aquí. Va.
That noise,
El clec aquest és el que volem sentir, no?
that's the one that we all want to hear.
Vol dir que hem fet una xocolata ben temperada, que seca correctament, que els cristalls estan ben posats.
That what it means is that we've tempered the chocolate correctly, that the right crystals are in place.
Molt bé. I ara esperem que tot surti bé.
We hope that everything goes well here.
Tenim alguna solució, si no surt bé?
Sí.
Sí, no? Vale. Aquí encara tenim una mica de xocolata. Tenim càmera aquí?
Do we have a camera here?
Aquí. Veus aquí què ha passat? Que ha anat solidificant per la part on té temperatura més baixa, no?
So here what you can see is that the chocolate has solidified, especially in the outside, which is where the temperature is lower.
Vale. Ara això ja és una mica desastre
So now that's a little bit of a disaster.
i ja no serveix. Ara el que hauríem de fer amb això, amb aquesta xocolata, és tornar-la a fondre a 45 graus i tornar-la a temperar per poder-la treballar correctament.
So what we will have to do with that is to melt it at 45 degrees and then to retemper it, so we could start working with it.
Fa olor ja, no?
Quin olor?
Sí, no?
Arriba l'olor?
Can you smell it?
50 segons. 50 segons i tenim pastís d'aniversari.
Come.
50 segons i tenim pastís d'aniversari.
Yeah, 50 more seconds and you'll have a birthday cake.
Si no, en tinc una sota amagat. També.
And I have another one hidden down.
Mentrestant, us ensenyarem els nutricionals. Hem baixat considerablement, ho expliques tu?
El?
Els nutricionals?
So here, let's talk a little bit about the nutritional values of the new sponge cake.
En aquest cas s'ha baixat bastant l'energia
The energy has gone down, as you can see,
i els carbohidrats també.
and carbohydrates as well.
Això podríem pensar també en el cas dels diabètics, de la gent diabètica.
So another thing would be, another use for that would be for people with diabetes.
Ha sortit bé això?
More or less.
Cake.
A cake. Ara és molt calent
A mi,
i no...
el que
So it's still too hot.
m'agradaria que veiéssiu la textura, no sé si la càmera, aquesta, no?
So I would like you to see the texture.
És un pa de pessic molt esponjat.
It's a very spongy sponge cake.
Sí o no?
Yes or no?
Aviam,
El tenia amagat,
aviam.
eh?
And that's the one that was hiding.
Mira. On està la càmera? Aquí? Mira.
Camera?
Arri!
No, és... No, és que és molt, 3 minutos, Brutal. Vinga, va. I ara, ja que hem fet el pa de pessic, anem per un altre. Ara posarem un vídeo. Hem dit que podíem fer, a part de textures que ja ho hem explicat, podíem fer formes.
So now that we're done with the sponge cake, we're going to play a video for you. We said that besides textures, what we could do with chocolate is shapes.
Us passaré un vídeo que dura 3 minuts, una cosa així. que explico com es fa una peça de xocolata artística.
So now I'm going to, in that video, which is going to last for 3 minutes, more or less, I'm going to show you how to make a chocolate shape.
És un encàrrec d'unes persones que anaven de viatge de nuvis a Austràlia.
De què?
Uns nuvis que anaven de viatge de nuvis a Austràlia.
So it was a request from some recently married that were going on their honeymoon to Australia.
I vaig pensar que podríem fer-los una parella de cangurs.
So I thought that we could do a couple of kangaroos for them.
La cosa comença, doncs, dibuixant el cangur, no?
So the first thing is to draw a kangaroo.
Una vegada tens el disseny del cangur i de la peça global,
So once you have that and the global outlook of the piece,
s'han de treure uns patrons de cartró,
so you need to make like some molds
per poder retallar després la
Carden.
xocolata amb aquesta forma.
so then you can cut the chocolate in that shape.
Amb tot aquest procés s'ha de tenir en compte que la xocolata té una reducció d'un 1%,
Una reducció d'un 1%?
un 1%,
That in that
una contracció d'un 1%.
that you have to think, you have to keep in mind while you do that, the chocolate is going to reduce by 1%.
I
to shrink
perquè
by
quadri
1%.
tota la peça després al final s'ha de tenir, doncs s'han de corregir uns valors, no?
So you have to correct the final values because it's going to shrink by 1%.
Per fer qualsevol peça de xocolata, a part de motlles, podem fer aquests patrons retallats i anar-los enganxant després.
So besides the molds, what we do is like these shapes, and then we glue them together.
tot el que heu vist són les peces necessàries per fer els cangurs.
So all that you've seen are the necessary pieces to make the kangaroos come alive.
No són motlles, són peces molt artesanes,
So as you can see, they're not only molds, but they're very artisanal pieces. Handcraft.
A mi el que m'agrada amb una peça de xocolata és que l'aspecte sigui comestible.
What I like about a piece of chocolate is that it looks edible.
Gràcies. Vale, doncs així es fa una peça de xocolata. Vull dir, és tan senzill com aquestes tècniques bàsiques i imaginació.
So that's how you make shapes with chocolate. It's basic techniques plus imagination.
Molt bé. Anem endavant.
Let's go ahead and
Ara us explicaré una mica el que fem nosaltres, productes, us donaré exemples de productes que fem nosaltres. No?
so now I'm going to give you examples of products that we do ourselves.
Ara és quan us podreu començar a menjar cosetes, ja.
So that's
Això
when
són-
you'll start eating other things in your class.
Ara, això és una mica un exemple de productes que s'han fet, que ja no fem.
So those are a few products that we had for a while. We don't have them
Un
anymore.
producte nou que traiem aquesta temporada, aquestes rajoles.
So these tiles, these bars are the ones that we sell for this season.
I bé, com he dit al principi, nosaltres doncs, tenim l'empresa a Barcelona,
As I said before, our company is located in Barcelona.
utilitzem elements de la ciutat.
We use elements from the city.
Això no té res a veure amb la ciutat, però són uns primers productes que es van fer a l'empresa l'any 93.
So these products don't have anything to do with the city, but they were done at the beginning in 1993.
Són uns torrons per l'època de Nadal.
So they are nougat especially made for Christmas time.
Això és el que es va fer el 93. Aquest seria l'evolució a l'any 99.
That's the first one's 93. That's the evolution in 99.
Per exemple, aquí vam voler fer 4 sabors bàsics.
4 basic flavors.
Aquest era un torró de xocolata amarg,
Bitter chocolate here,
un xocolata àcid,
acidic,
dolç
sweet,
i salat.
and salty.
Llavors eren com les 4 columnes dels sabors del món de la xocolata.
So represent the 4 basic columns of taste in chocolate.
En aquest cas, Això va ser l'any 2000... no sé.
That's 2000-ish.
En aquest cas, el que vam voler fer amb aquests torrons era fer sabors del nord, del sud, de l'est i l'oest.
So we wanted to do with these turrons, or its flavors from east, west, south, and north.
Posant com a referència la nostra ciutat, Barcelona,
So as the focal point, Barcelona.
i els sabors que tenien cada torró eren records de sabors de viatges que havia fet jo per diferents països del món.
So taking that into consideration, the flavors here were memories or remembrances from trips that I've made around the world.
Llavors, la forma vol ser la forma d'una pedra, d'un còdol.
So the shape of the is like the shape of the turron is that of a cobblestone.
Són aquelles pedres que tu t'emportes dels viatges per arreu del món i que t'emportes a casa per conservar un record d'aquell viatge. No?
So those are the shapes that when you go around the world, you bring a stone home. You know, it's exactly that shape from a beach or from here, from there.
A part d'aquests productes de Nadal, nosaltres el que fem són tot l'any 6 col·leccions de productes, la col·lecció Barcelona, la Gastronòmic, Concept.
Yeah, so every year besides the Christmas fair, what we do is 6 lines of products: Barcelona, Gastronomic, Concept, Essentials, Virtual, and Artistic,
Artist.
Art.
La col·lecció Barcelona, com he comentat abans, és la que elaborem productes vinculats al disseny arquitectònic de la ciutat.
So the Barcelona line is the one that resembles architecture around the city, you know, like
Rajoles, trencadís dissenyat per Gaudí, per
from
un hexàgon.
bars to broken pieces, like resemble the Gaudí mosaics.
També tenim la col·lecció gastronòmica. El més important d'aquesta col·lecció és la combinació d'ingredients.
So in this collection, the most important part, the gastronomic ones, is the interaction of different ingredients.
Ara podríeu menjar aquesta.
This one, if you can find it in your handout.
Això són uns productes que nosaltres en diem bomboles. Per nosaltres les bomboles són grajees.
That you know, these products is what we call, it's like a bite-sized nugget. That's what they are.
Aquí és una pell de taronja confitada coberta amb xocolata negra 70% de cacau.
So here the one that you'll eat is like orange peel and with dark chocolate,
És un
which
sabor
contains
clàssic.
70% of
És un sabor
cocoa.
clàssic,
It's a super classic.
però en aquesta col·lecció tenim sabors clàssics, més contemporanis, més nous, com per exemple pot ser pebre rosa amb xocolata negra.
So here we have, you know, from in that collection we have from very classical combinations to ones that are a little bit more esoteric, like pink peppercorn with dark chocolate,
Violet amb xocolata negra,
violet flower with dark chocolate, you know, more contemporary.
pork corn,
Pork?
cansalada.
Ah, yeah. Bacon?
No,
No?
Bacon,
Cansalada?
cansalada.
Like pork belly, let's say. Without the smokiness, yeah.
una altra cosa que fem és una crema de xocolata per posar sobre el pa,
So another thing that we do is like a chocolate cream, so you can spread on top of bread.
però aquesta crema de xocolata està feta amb oli d'oliva.
So the difference is that this chocolate paste is made out of, it's made with olive oil.
Amb oli d'oliva, o sigui, normalment les cremes de xocolata estan fetes amb greixos poc definits, greixos industrials,
That normally chocolates are made with ill-defined fat, industrial chemical fats.
i el que fem aquí és fer una crema de xocolata amb xocolata negra 70% de cacau i oli d'oliva de diferents varietats.
So here what we do is we make a cream made with 70% cocoa and olive oil coming from different varieties.
La tercera col·lecció que us presento és la col·lecció Concepte,
The third collection here that I'm
és
going
la que
to
pretén que nosaltres, és la que amb la que pretenem anar més lluny, no?
So
Explicar
that's-
més coses.
that's the one that's like the Trailblazer collection, the one that pretends to go further.
Anem una mica justos de temps i no us ho podré explicar molt detalladament.
So we do not have that much time, and I'm not going to go for the fine leather, fine print
Però
here.
aquí tenim una col·lecció de continents, d'oceans, que el que pretenem és representar el sabor d'aquests continents o oceans buscant productes originaris de la zona.
So here the first one is like a collection that reflects different continents, and the second one different oceans around the world, and all of them use products from that area.
I tenim un producte que es diu Planetarium, que
The planetarium line,
és el més conegut de casa nostra, em sembla.
so which I think that it's the most known at home.
Són uns bombons en forma de planeta,
So they are candies made in the shape of a
i
planet,
un superbombó
and the big one,
en forma que és el Sol.
which represents the sun.
En aquesta caixa de xocolates el que pretenem és allò tan tòpic que és menjar-nos el món, no?
So in this collection, what we pretend is to eat up the world, the universe.
Un altre producte que hem fet, que ja no fabriquem però que és interessant, és l'Imagine, és un producte inspirat en la cançó de John Lennon.
So another one that's very interesting that we don't produce anymore, it's Imagine, which obviously is inspired by the John Lennon song.
El que intentem és recrear aquesta cançó a través del color blanc de la sonografia i el piano que utilitzava John Lennon per aquesta cançó.
So what we do is we recreate the mood with the white colors as John Lennon did with the,
Els
the rapping and the piano.
Els bombons volen explicar la diversitat cultural del món,
So
diferents colors
the candies reflect the cultural diversity of the world,
mesclats.
all mixed up.
Això és la cosa i una frase de la cançó, i aquí tenim un CD amb una versió especial d'aquesta cançó que s'ha fet per aquest producte.
So here we have a line from the song, and here is like a CD made specially for that product.
Aquest és un producte que vam fer perquè volíem fer una caixa de bombons d'alcohol.
This one is one that we made, a line that we created because the goal was to make one using alcohol.
I vam creure que podríem posar-li el nom de Prohibition,
So we came up with the name of Prohibition.
que és la prohibició de l'alcohol als Estats Units.
It was the
Als anys
prohibition
20.
in the United States
És
in
com un
the
homenatge.
1920s.
Vam relacionar-ho amb el jazz, vam editar un disc de jazz i vam
Obviously.
fer uns bombons d'alcohol.
Okay, and so what we did is we produced a jazz record, and we created some candies filled with alcohol.
La col·lecció essencial
The essential collection.
és la que, en aquesta col·lecció, el protagonisme és el cacau.
So in this one, the main character is cocoa.
Ara podeu menjar la rajoleta de xocolata que us queda.
So please eat if you've done that correctly, the last piece of chocolate that you have.
Aquesta rajoleta de xocolata és un xocolata fet amb cacau de São Tomé i Príncipe.
That the bar that you'll find there, the chocolate bar, it's made with chocolate with cocoa from São Tomé Island.
Està fet amb el mateix cacau que heu menjat al principi,
So it's made with the same cocoa from the cocoa bean that you ate at the beginning.
però a diferència de l'altra xocolata que heu menjat,
But the difference,
és que aquesta xocolata no està refinada.
so it's that this one has not been refined.
Per tant, quan la mengeu, notareu una textura terrosa, rústica,
So when you eat it, you'll find like a sandy, rustic texture to it.
on el sabor del cacau és molt evident.
So that it's the flavor of cocoa is very evident.
No
very
teniu la
clear.
textura greixosa d'una xocolata convencional,
So it's not the greasy texture of a conventional,
perquè no hem refinat,
Xocolata.
no hem premsat la xocolata i per tant no hem extret el greix.
because the chocolate has not been pressed, and so the fat has not been extracted.
I com a conseqüència tenim una textura més fresca,
So it's a fresher texture
amb molt
as a
de
result,
sabor.
with lots of flavor.
Amb aquest cacau molt especial de São Tomé que nosaltres importem directament, coneixem la plantació, hem fet una sèrie de productes per explicar la importància del cacau.
So with this cocoa that we bring directly from São Tomé, from a very small plantation, we've done a line of cocos to explain the origins of cocoa.
Per exemple, hi ha una que es diu Making of Chocolate, aquest producte que es diu Making of Chocolate,
Making what?
Making of Chocolate.
The making of chocolate, yeah. The making of chocolate. With that case of chocolate, which is called
En el
the
qual
making of chocolate.
expliquem amb una pel·lícula com es processa el xocolata fins a arribar, el cacau fins a arribar a la xocolata.
At the same time, we send it along with a video that explains step by step how you make chocolate.
Amb aquest cacau fem aquesta rajola de xocolata que us heu menjat.
With this chocolate bar that you just ate,
I, bueno, i ara, per últim, no, penúltim, provareu un bombó de la col·lecció virtual.
and the last thing that you're going to eat now is to try it's candy from the virtual collection, from the virtual line.
La col·lecció virtual és una col·lecció de bombons que no es menja.
So it's a line of candies that you do not eat.
És una col·lecció d'un xocolata que només s'olora.
So it's only smell.
Llavors, en aquest cas, tenim una rosa virtual.
So we have a virtual rose here,
Tenim una aigua virtual,
virtual water,
una virtual rosa,
virtual rose.
i llavors tenim aquesta forma d'aquí, volem que sigui una forma d'un bombó.
So we want that at the top to be the shape of a candy.
Llavors aquest bombó, si l'olorem, fa l'olor de xocolata i rosa.
So if you smell that, if you sniff that, it has the smell of chocolate and rose.
I llavors és un bombó que nosaltres podem tenir al despatx, enganxat, aquí, a ferro.
So it's like a magnet candy that we can have it everywhere in your office.
Aquí. Vale? I llavors és un bombó que pot tenir olor de xocolata només, pot tenir olor d'espècies, pot tenir olor de flors,
One has the,
i que,
only chocolate, flowers,
i que a més dura
spices.
anys. No?
And it stays that way for years.
Podeu olorar, si voleu olorar. Aneu a
If
olorar.
anyone wants to smell it,
Okay? Molt bé. I per últim, i després preguntes, tenim la col·lecció artista.
and at last we have the artist collection.
Col·laborem amb molts artistes
We collaborate with many different artists
perquè ens facin productes que ells creguin, no? Perquè ells creïn productes per després nosaltres fer amb xocolata.
so we engage them in a creation process so they
Aquest
can
cas-
inspire us to make chocolate.
En aquest cas, l'Anna Mir ha fet una bola de xocolata amb un tall per posar a la copa de cava.
So in this case, Anamir has done a chocolate ball so we can place it on top of a cava glass.
I en aquest cas, doncs, és Santos Bregaña, és un dissenyador industrial,
Santos Bregaña, which is an industrial designer,
ha fet un producte que es diu Pitàgores.
so he created a product named Pythagoras.
És una rajola de xocolata on totes les porcions són triangulars,
So it's a bar where all the portions are triangular,
que són de formes diferents,
different shapes, as you can
però mitjançant una forma matemàtica.
see, but they follow a
Michael?
mathematics formula.
Esta és la classe de matemàtiques.
So that's the
Són diferents, all diferents, all same grams. Okay? Tots són diferents, però tots tenen els mateixos grams.
so all of them are,
Tots són formes diferents, però que tots matemàticament tenen els mateixos grams. Cada porció té els mateixos grams.
that all of them are different, but mathematically all of them have exactly the same weight, the same grams.
I aquí s'acaba.
So that's then.
Any questions? Okay. So we have time just for a few questions.
Que solament tenim... Veniu aquí, prop meu. Que solament tenim temps per poques preguntes.
Sí, sí.
Molt bé, felicitats. Perfecte.
How do you stay so skinny?
Que com el mantens tan prim?
Chocolate is good,
Chocolate is good for you.
no problem.
Alan?
What's the free flour? That gluten-free flour?
What is the gluten
gluten-free
La,
flour.
la farina que vas utilitzar sense gluten, quin és? Com es diu?
Ah, és una marca espanyola. És
It's
però
a
qualsevol farina és bona.
It's a Spanish brand, so probably would be difficult to find here. But anyone that you can find in supermarkets
Sí.
would work, gluten-free would work for this recipe. Yeah.
What, the camera?
In those recipes,
We're
are
just
the
gonna wait for them to
percentages by weight or by volume?
Sorry, the recipe is what?
Are they by weight or by volume?
Que les recetes que feu va per volum o per pes?
Per pes, les que m'has posat són per pes. Sí, totes són per pes,
By weight.
by weight.
Totes les que heu explicat avui.
Is there a limit to the number of times you can let it get untempered and retemper it properly, or
Si hi ha un límit al número de vegades que pots temperar i
No,
destemperar.
no hi ha límit.
No, no límit.
infinitely?
So, have you ever done something like chocolate chip cookies where you try to temper the chocolate chips that you've melted while they're baking and then they cool? Have you ever tried to actually temper the chips
So have you
in
done-
that kind of recipe?
Can you repeat the...
Have you ever tempered?
Yeah,
Have you ever
yeah.
tempered chocolate chips in chocolate chip cookies after they've baked?
Si has temperat les petites parts que poses a les galetes de xocolata, després les punxes
sí.
a les baixes.
Sí, totes les
excellent.
productes que s'elaborin amb xocolata, ja siguin xips per les galetes, ja siguin... Tot s'ha de temperar.
That all the products that you use for chocolate, with chocolate, big chips or bigger pieces, you have to temper them.
Hi, over here. Hi, I'm up here
Però el
middle.
que passa... Just one second, please.
Yes.
Però el que passa és que si tu les poses al forn,
Sí.
es fonen i després tornen a la
Sí.
temperatura.
Sí, però això ja és una evolució del producte a posteriori, però el fabricant de xocolata, quan entrega els xips per al senyor que fa galetes, l'ha d'entregar un producte temperat.
Yeah. So that's a posterior. That's something that happens after. But the manufacturer, when he delivers the chocolate, it has to be already tempered. The chocolate has to come tempered.
The chocolate maker made the chocolate well. Then, yes,
Okay.
but
Yes, 2 points. The wonderful explanation about the different, the granularity, how that has been caused because it's not pressed and the oil is not out. There's actually one of those factories that's in Cambridge. MIT gets a tour in January. But going to the addition of the flavors, is there some tips about what may be careful? You want to have more dried fruit peel or more pureed raspberry that's more like leather because too much moisture will be a problem? Anything like that?
Let's go for parts, please. I have some memory, but not.
Yes, the
Just the
flavor.
question. Just the question.
To add the flavor, do you have some tips about adding natural flavors, and in particular when they have moisture, like fruits?
Yes.
And is there some tips there so that you don't dilute the chocolate and have problem?
Ja, que diguéssim, quan tu vols afegir diferents sabors a la xocolata, no quan estàs treballant amb ella, sobretot alguns dels productes que tenen aigua, com per exemple podien ser les maduixes, no?
Sí.
I tot això, si hi ha alguns trucos que pots escriure com per anar al tanto perquè no se't desgavelli tot.
aviam, ara la pregunta que em fa és extensíssima, no?
That's a very extensive question.
No tot funciona amb xocolata.
Not everything works with chocolate, mixing it with chocolate.
Per exemple, una fruita amb un poder de sabor important com pot ser la llimona, amb poca que n'hi posis a la xocolata li dones un aroma.
So, for instance, let's say something that can be very concentrated with lots of flavor, like lemon, with a little bit brings an immense amount of flavor.
Però, per exemple, el meló, que és un producte que té molt poc sabor, n'hauries de posar tant que acabaries fent líquid. I, a més, no aconseguiries que la xocolata, que té un sabor més potent, acabés tinguent gust de meló.
So, for instance, on the other hand, on the opposite spectrum, you would have melon, that you would need an incredible amount that for your mouth to pick up the flavor, and then it wouldn't work together with chocolate because it would have like a very, very big amounts of water as well. And even so, even by bringing lots of melon, at the end you would only taste chocolate, or almost only chocolate.
There was in this series a part where they concentrated in a little capsule, almost like a vitamin capsule, inside of something. I don't know what it was. It's something big. Is that something you have experimented with? Something watery, enclosed in an edible capsule?
Que en aquesta sèrie, un altre moment, vaig esferificació, possiblement, amb una petita càpsula hi havia dintre el xocolata, quan tu la mossegaves explotava el
Sí.
sabor. És algo que has fet tu? O...
No, l'esferificació és un producte fràgil, molt bo per la cuina, pels postres, però pel món de la xocolata comercialitzable no és pràcticament
Yeah, that
utilitzat.
esferification, if that's what we're thinking here, it's very good for cuisine, regular cuisine, or for the pastry of a restaurant, but for a commercial use in the world of chocolate, it wouldn't be viable.
Okay, 2 more questions, but not long questions, just short.
Un parell de preguntes més.
Okay. So 2 weeks ago, the Roca brothers were here. 2 weeks ago, the Roca brothers were here, and they used a rotovap to distill vodka, or I guess distill chocolate. I'm assuming in vodka or something high grade. Do you think you could take that distillate and then restructure it to make like a clear chocolate bar?
The distillation?
Yeah. So you take that distillate, and then do you think you could restructure it and make a clear chocolate bar? Like using like maybe like gelatin.
Que fa un parell de setmanes va haver 2 cuiners catalans aquí que el que van fer van parlar de destil·lació i que la destil·lació, si et penses que fent aquesta destil·lació amb el sabor que tu volguessis el podries tornar a incorporar al xocolata.
És una via. És una via, el que passa que com moltes, com els olis essencials, com moltes vies. Sí.
Yeah, that's a way, that's a path. It's one like essential oils or others, that it could be done, yeah.
So, but like where the point is to kind of get that
Let's
mouthfeel.
not long questions, okay? Just one question. One more.
Is that virtual chocolate supposed to satisfy your chocolate craving?
Que si et sembla que si el xocolata aquest virtual et satisfà les ganes, els antojos que tens pel xocolata.
Depèn del moment. Perquè aquest xocolata virtual està creat per un moment molt especial.
It depends on the moment. That virtual chocolate, has been created having in mind a very specific moment.
Si tu estàs allotjat en un hotel fantàstic de Boston,
if you're in a very special, fantastic hotel in Boston,
has anat a sopar a un gran restaurant de Boston,
so you've been in a terrific restaurant, having dinner in a terrific restaurant in Boston,
i has anat a prendre unes copes en una cocteleria fantàstica de Boston,
and you've been having some drinks in a fantastic bar, cocktail bar around town,
pot ser que arribis a l'habitació i si trobes una rajoleta de xocolata no et vingui de gust.
So perhaps when you go back to your room and you find a chocolate bar, perhaps you don't have, that doesn't appeal to you to eat it.
Però en canvi si trobes un bombonet d'aquests a la tauleta de nit,
But if you find instead a virtual candy in your nightstand,
a la millor que està fet, imagina't que l'hotel té un jardí de magnòlies,
let's imagine that the hotel has a magnolia flower garden,
i aquest bombonet té aquesta olor de magnòlies,
and the candy has the same smell as the magnolias around it.
olorar allò pot transportar-me a un món interessant.
So smelling that can bring me to a very interesting world.
Però el més important és que jo puc emportar aquest bombó de magnòlies a Barcelona,
But the most interesting part is that I can bring that magnolia scented candy back to Barcelona.
i durant anys agafar aquell bombó, posar-me al nas i recordar-me de Boston.
And during years, to bring that candy to my nose and think of Boston.
And that's how you stay so skinny. Okay, that's how you stay so slim.
Slim, xocolata.